This is Rand Paul stepping onto the Senate floor and saying what a lot of people weren't allowed to say out loud.
President,
The senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object, I think we all want transparency. I think we all want reports to be revealed. We think the American people deserve to know what happened with the Russians hacking into Democrat email, with the Russian involvement in trying to affect the outcome of our elections. I think we all want that. What do we know so far? We know that we spent $30 million to investigate this, and they have decided and concluded, after doing hundreds of interviews and thousands of subpoenas, they have concluded that President Trump did not collude with the Russians, did not conspire with the Russians, did not commit a crime with the Russians, and as the president has said repeatedly, he never talked to the Russians. We do know that. That's what we know so far. But now that we know that, in addition to the Mueller report, we also need to know, was there malfeasance? Was there misuse of government power? Did President Obama's administration get involved in an election to actually try to manipulate and infiltrate the Trump campaign to entrap them or try to spread information that was incorrect? We need to know that. So I am asking that the senator, by unanimous consent, accept my amendment, which would say that not only will we see the Mueller report, we will also see the communications between John Brennan, known to have already lied to the Senate about spying on the Senate computers, and James Clapper, also known to have lied to the Senate in testimony over the bulk collection of your phone records, that their communications with James Comey, who is known to have leaked illegally information about this investigation to the press, that their communications become known to all of us. We need to know why they decided that the fake Russian dossier was real. The country had concluded it wasn't. No media outlet would produce the Russian dossier because it was so unverifiable. And yet, the FBI head, the CIA head kept sending the dossier out to people, having it come back to them again and say, oh my goodness, look what this senator gave us. It was what they already had, that nobody was believing and nobody was discounting, and now the Mueller report has said was fake, was made up. The dossier was not true. But that's what this entire investigation. Why should we know about this? Because we don't want this to happen every 2 to 4 years. I don't care whether it's a Democrat president or a Republican president. We should not waste the time of the entire country sending spies into campaign, making false accusations, and tying the country in knots for 2 years. Tying us in knots such that people are at each other's throat now and can't talk to each other because we spread this false narrative that President Trump had something to do with the Russians. It was not true. We spent $30 million, and now we know it's not true. So I ask today unanimous consent that my amendment be added to the current resolution. We will agree to see the Mueller report as long as the other side will agree to show us the communications that took place in deciding to promote this fake allegation against the president, and we want to know whether there was misuse of their office. If that is allowed, then I will agree to consent, but I would ask at this time unanimous consent that my amendment be added to the senator's resolution.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object, I would simply point out that this entire investigation was started by the Justice Department under Republican administration, then, of course, guided by the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who was appointed by the President. I would note that this is a simple resolution just trying to get the report. We may not agree with the foundation of this investigation, but we are simply trying to get the fruits of the investigation, which I believe will be helpful to this chamber to figure out what we should do to protect our national security. So we are simply trying to adopt and consider the House resolution, which again, 420 to 0, including all Republicans present, the House had voted 420-0 that they want to see the report. And that's why I was simply hoping that we could do this on a bipartisan basis and try to see the report ourselves. And therefore, I object.
Madam President.
Objection is heard.
Madam President.
Is there objection to the original request?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from Kentucky.
The senator made one point, that the investigation was begun under Republicans of this dossier. The Mueller report and the Mueller aspect of this was begun under Republicans. But the actual investigation, the promoting, the passing around of the fake Russian dossier occurred under President Obama's administration. What we need to discover, and we do not yet know, was President Obama involved? Was this done for partisan purposes? Was this done to try to elect Hillary Clinton? Was this done with malintent? We need to know the truth, and to get at the truth, we need not only the Mueller report, we need every ounce of information about the people at the very top of our intelligence community that were promoting the inclusion of this fake dossier that most American media outlets had discounted as unverifiable. It's turned out to be unverifiable. We based this investigation on a lie. We should investigate who the liars were. I object.
Objection.
What you just watched wasn't just another Senate speech. It was Rand Paul putting a spotlight on something far bigger than the Russian narrative that dominated headlines for years. Because here's the reality he's pointing to. After years of investigations, after tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, after endless media coverage, the central claim that Donald Trump colluded with Russia collapsed. The Robert Mueller investigation didn't deliver the smoking gun people were promised. And that's where Paul pivots and where this gets uncomfortable for a lot of people. He's not arguing against transparency. In fact, he's demanding more of it, but not just selectively, not just when it targets one side. He's saying if we're going to dig into Trump, then we better be just as willing to dig into what happened before that investigation even began. That means asking serious questions about the intelligence community leadership at the time, people like John Brennan, James Clapper, and James Comey. Paul isn't being subtle here. He's outright saying these are individuals with credibility issues, people who, in his view, misled Congress or the public, and yet played key roles in shaping one of the most consequential political investigations in modern U.S. history. And then there's the dossier. The infamous Steele dossier, something that was treated like explosive intelligence in political and media circles, but, as Paul argues, was widely considered unverifiable, even at the time. He's making the case that this document wasn't just flawed, it was foundational to an investigation that consumed the country. Think about that implication for a second. If what he's saying is true or even partially true, then this wasn't just a bad call. It would mean federal power was used or misused in a way that influenced a presidential election and then tied the country up in political chaos for years afterward. And Paul goes even further. He raises the question that many politicians avoid touching directly: what did Barack Obama know and when did he know it? That's a serious accusation, not a casual one. He's essentially asking whether actions taken during the Obama administration were politically motivated, whether they were aimed at damaging Trump or benefiting Hillary Clinton. Now, to be clear, that's not something that's been definitively proven. But Paul's argument isn't that we already have all the answers, his argument is that we don't, and that's the problem. Because from his perspective, transparency wasn't applied equally. One side was investigated relentlessly, publicly, and aggressively. The other side, according to Paul, shielded. And that's where this turns from a political argument into something bigger, a question about trust. Trust in institutions, trust in intelligence agencies, trust in whether investigations are about justice or politics. Even the pushback he gets in this clip proves the divide. You hear the argument from the other side: this was a bipartisan effort, the investigation had Republican involvement, figures like Rod Rosenstein were appointed under Trump. But Paul isn't letting that settle the issue. He's drawing a distinction. Yes, parts of the investigation happened under Republicans, but the origin of the narrative, the circulation of the dossier, the early intelligence actions, those trace back to the Obama-era leadership. And that's why he keeps hammering one point. If we're serious about preventing this from happening again, then we can't just accept partial transparency. Because what he's really warning about is a cycle. Every election, every administration, if one side starts using intelligence tools, investigations, or narratives to undermine the other, then the country doesn't just get divided, it gets destabilized. And you can hear that frustration in his tone. He talks about how the country was tied in knots, about how people stopped trusting each other, about how political discourse turned toxic. He's framing this as more than just a political fight. It's about the long-term damage to the system itself. Now, whether you agree with him or not, here's the part you can't ignore. He's demanding accountability across the board. Not just for Trump, not just for Republicans, but for anyone in any administration who might have abused power. And that's the part that makes this moment stick. Because it forces a choice: do you support transparency only when it helps your side, or do you support it even when it might expose uncomfortable truths? That's the real debate underneath everything you just watched. And it's not going away anytime soon. If you made it this far, drop your take in the comments. Do you think this was about justice or politics? And if you want more breakdowns like this that actually dig into what's being said, not just what's trending, hit like, subscribe, and stick around.